Hey everyone, my name is Mishal and you're watching Mishal's Law Series. And on today's episode, we have a very special guest with us, Chris Bryden, who is a 500 ranked barrister and the deputy head at Four Kings Chambers, and also known as a LinkedIn influencer. It's an honor to have you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Thank you for inviting me on.
We will be asking him 5 short questions related to his legal career and his legal field, and let's see what he answers. So, my first question from you is 17 years at the same chambers. What kept you there?
Well, when I started out at the bar, there was relatively little movement unless people had decided they wanted to specialize in a particular area. Um, People tended to stay in the same chambers. And I started out at a chambers that is no longer with us, 2 Gray's Inn Square. I did my pupillage there. I spent a number of happy years there, but our numbers dwindled, and so we merged with Four Kings Bench Walk back in 2009. And I can safely say it's the best thing that happened to me in my career because it was a move to another common law set, which had an ethos of doing work across the board. But most importantly, it's an incredibly friendly set. Our senior clerk, Lee Cook's been there for over 40 years. It's been his career, man and boy. And he's been senior clerk since he was 25. So he really has created an atmosphere where it's a bit of a cliche to say it, but we feel like a family.
Yeah.
We care about each other. We socialize outside of working hours, and we look out for each other. And there's a lot of pastoral care and looking after each other, both seniors mentoring the more junior practitioners, but also everyone just looking out for each other. It's just a lovely atmosphere. That's why I've stayed for all that time.
That's great. My second question from you is that you are now one of the top legal voices on LinkedIn. What made a barrister post online?
Well, probably ego, which is why most people become barristers in the first place. But more seriously, LinkedIn has been something that has, I think, increasingly become important from a legal marketing perspective. And again, there's been a lot of change since I started at the bar. When I started out, the rules had only just changed to allow barristers to advertise ourselves at all. Before that, it was all through our clerks. We weren't supposed to socialize with solicitors. We weren't supposed to be having views. And I think that the profession has opened up hugely in the past 25 years or so. And barristers have become much more accessible, both to their solicitors, but also to their lay clients. Public access has become a big deal, of course.
Yeah,
And LinkedIn is one of those ways in which it's quite useful to be able to keep a professional
yeah,
tally of the achievements, the sorts of things that you're doing, whether that's publishing a book or whether it's attending events. It's also, I find, very collegiate amongst legal practitioners, barristers, and solicitors. There's a lot of looking out for each other again. There's the liking of posts, there's reposting, engaging. And we're all busy professionals. We don't get as much downtime as we used to anymore. So LinkedIn's quite a good way of keeping in touch with like-minded people. It's also a very good way, I think, of magnifying the reach that we as barristers have.
yeah,
A lot has, again, become client focused. Clients are much more likely to want to know a bit about the barrister that they're
yeah,
being recommended by a solicitor. And LinkedIn is the obvious place to be able to
yeah,
showcase that.
yeah,
I I find it more difficult with things like Facebook or Instagram. I'm not
yeah,
on
definitely.
Facebook, um, but it's that blending of personal and professional. Whereas LinkedIn is pretty much purely a professional outpost. It allows you to showcase those talents,
Yeah,
and I think that it's quite useful
yeah,
to let other people know what can be done. Aspiring pupils to chambers can see what sort of things we're doing in terms of going out, talking to solicitors, engaging with events. I co-write a lot of articles with junior members of chambers to give them a boost into the publishing world, and being able to showcase that on LinkedIn helps as well.
yeah,
So it's a marketing tool, but it's also
yeah,
one of those things that just allows your voice to be magnified. And Simon Marshall, who takes the lead at looking at the legal linked influencers, as he calls it,
yeah,
has done a very good job of bringing a competitive group of people
yeah,
into
definitely.
even more competition
Yeah.
by having these LinkedIn rankings. So it's quite good fun as well to see how they come out at the end of each quarter.
Coming down from a LinkedIn influencer is a big thing. Um, my third question is that you cover property, family, and chancery law. Most of the time, barristers they choose a specific lane for their career. So, what made you go broad?
I've always been interested in the way in which the law is connected. And I think, and anyone who's spoken to me at any length about this has been bored to tears by me going on about it, on and on and on. But I think that in order to be a good barrister in the fields that I do, so the overlapping fields of property, chancery, and family, you need to know enough about each of those areas.
Yeah.
If you become hyper specialized, you can miss things. And there's so much overlap. So my specific areas of work are predominantly contentious probate and inheritance act disputes, divorce, financial remedies, and property disputes, boundaries, tolata, that sort of thing. And there is a huge overlap because it's all dealing with people and people's lives. And I think you need to know enough about each of those areas to be any good at any of them, to be particularly good at any of them. So in a divorce case, for example, if you're dealing with the possibility of a property that's also part owned by the parents of one of the parties, you're going to need to understand concepts relating to tolata in order to be able to advise that client properly. If there's a family company, you're going to need to know about company law. You may need to know about employment law. If there are a number of properties, then you're going to need to know about property law and how to deal with them. And the same applies in other areas. In Chancery, one of the areas, as I say, that I do a lot of work in is will disputes and Inheritance Act claims. And if you have a disinherited spouse who wants to bring a claim, well, the statutory checklist is effectively a cross-check to what would happen in a divorce if there'd been a divorce on the day of the death rather than a bereavement. So you have to know about family law. You have to be up to date on your financial remedies work to be able to assist, to give that advice, to fight the case in court. And I think that being too narrow a specialist in these fields can make you blinkered. That's not to say that there aren't a great deal of very specialized, incredibly good practitioners out there. There are. But because I'm a bit of a legal geek and because I think that it's important to have that crossover knowledge, what I've tried to do is position myself and position many of the juniors who I've trained in chambers as being at that crossroads, straddling different areas of law, so that rather than a client having to have a chancery barrister and a financial remedies barrister, for example, they can just have one of us. Saves cost, saves time, and also means that we have that crossover experience. So that's why I've never specialized too much. Although that said, when I started out, my practice was far more broad than it is even now.
Yeah, that's amazing. My fourth question from you is your evidence to Parliament helped them make the stalking offence in UK law. How did you feel about it?
That was great fun. It was quite a long time ago, but I had developed a bit of a academic interest in the Protection from Harassment Act 1997 with a colleague of mine, or a then colleague, went back in the two Grayson Square days, Michael Salter. And we'd written a number of articles about harassment, in particular harassment through the internet. And one of the concerns that we had was that the internet provides what we called plausible anonymity. It's very, very easy, or at least in those days, it was very, very easy to create an anonymous account or an anonymous email address and effectively harass someone through that. And one of the concerns we identified was that the way in which the 97 Act was drafted didn't provide sufficient protection. As a result of some of the articles that we wrote, including one which is still regularly cited now in the Information and Communications Technology Journal, we got in touch with some academics at the University of Bedfordshire, and they appointed us as honorary fellows and created the National Centre for Cyberstalking Research. So we wrote a few more papers with them off the back of that. And then as Parliament was considering amending the law on stalking, and particularly to look at aspects such as this to tighten it up, we were called into House of Lords Committee to give evidence as to what we considered needed to be done. And I was actually slightly at odds with most of the academics who gave evidence, because I was of the view we didn't need new legislation. We needed new guidance as to the way in which the Act was being invoked. I thought that it was fit for purpose, but that the way in which courts and the CPS on the criminal side of things were approaching things could be tightened. that was a minority view, and eventually they did decide that they would legislate in 2007, I think it was. Some new legislation came out which amended the act and beefed it up. It's humbling to be part of that.
Yeah.
In a very small way to have played a part in changing the law. I've never been fortunate enough, as some of my colleagues have been, to get to the Court of Appeal and have that brilliant decision which changes the course of the law. So to have had a say in how Parliament decided to legislate in primary legislation, as I say, is still a proud moment.
Well, that was an amazing effort of yours. My follow-up question from you is that you wrote a book in 2015 related to workplace. Would you like to tell more about that?
Yeah, again, this all stemmed from the same sort of interests in how social media in particular was changing different areas of law. It's a bit like how AI now is influencing things, though AI is on a much greater scale. And back in those days, I was doing a fair amount of employment training, and we were seeing what I thought was quite clearly a lack of understanding amongst all senior practitioners and employment judges of the effect of social media. And we were getting various decisions, particularly in relation to social media use outside of the actual workplace. And so one of the things which I thought was quite important was to consider whether or not the law was fit for purpose in terms of what people were doing. If you were posting on your personal Facebook your own personal views, even if they were disgusting views, should you be allowed to do that, or should that become an employment issue? On the one hand, you can see the risk for reputational damage for the company if that employee is traced back to that post. But on the other hand, you have the importance of freedom of expression. And so why shouldn't someone be able to express themselves in a personal context, not linked to their employer? And it was interesting to see the development of the case law. And when we submitted our original manuscript, I think it was 60,000 words long, our publishers said, well, this is really interesting, but we now need another 30,000 words from you, which was a bit worrying. So what we did was we did a trawl of case law from other jurisdictions. So we looked at America, we looked at Canada, we looked at Australia, the other big common law jurisdictions, to see how their law was dealing with all of this. And that was fascinating because we saw there was a clear divergence in the way it was all going. I think that it's fair to say that the law has now caught up with social media generally, that there is a fairly clear set of parameters about what employers can and can't do. Most companies now have social media policies which tell their employees what they can and can't do, and that, of course, assists them if there are any unfair dismissal type claims, discrimination claims being brought if they discipline or sack someone for social media posts. So I think the world has caught up with what was, back when I wrote that book, an emerging trend. But we're going to see exactly the same thing happen with AI. We're going to see the next 5 years, the law being in a complete state of flux in the workplace, but everywhere else as well, because no one knows what difference AI is going to make. And by the time we've caught up to it, it will already have happened and moved on.
Yeah, definitely. AI has been the new employer world now, and more of the time, AI is used more often than employers are needed. So, my last question from you is, what is that one piece of advice that you would like to give all of the young lawyers entering this legal field?
And that is a good question. It is a difficult time to come into the legal field. It always has been difficult, but I think it's harder now probably than at any other time in my career. So the first thing to say is to persevere, keep trying. It is a, as I say, difficult profession to break into, but a very rewarding one. Find every angle that you can to build experience. Do whatever you can to build profile. But in terms of a junior lawyer, the best advice is always going to be, if in doubt, ask. The whole point of being a trainee or a pupil or a junior solicitor or barrister is that you're not expected to know everything. And far better to feel a bit silly and ask what you think might be a stupid question and then get it right than assume, make a mistake and don't get it right. But if you do decide not to ask and you do make a mistake, then this one's for free. Fess up straight away. It's always something that can be fixed as long as you come clean and don't try and cover it up.
That's an amazing advice. I would like to thank Chris for being on Michelle's Law Series. It was an honor to have you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.